One of the Super Bowls, we were at the Mall of America in Minnesota. It was 0 degrees outside. What do? You've been inside all week. The only place I've been is Benihana's. Half the team is sick. Everybody's hooked up to IV bags. It's just like, get me to the biggest day of my life.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Ryan, president of the University of Virginia, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the final episode of the third season of Inside UVA. This podcast is a chance for me to speak with some of the amazing people at the university and to learn more about what they do and who they are. My hope is that listeners will ultimately have a better understanding of how UVA works and a deeper appreciation of the remarkably talented and dedicated people who make UVA the institution it is. I'm thrilled to be joined today by UVA alum Chris Long. Chris was a star player on the UVA football team, earning All-American honors and serving as captain. He went on to the National Football League, where he played for 11 years on 3 teams and won back-to-back Super Bowl championships for 2 different teams. Chris was recognized in 2018 as a Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year, and his jersey number 91 is retired from the Virginia Cavaliers football program. Since his retirement from the NFL, Chris has led a busy life as a father, husband, media analyst, philanthropist, and podcast host. Through the Chris Long Foundation, he has advanced initiatives to provide clean drinking water and promote education equity and access for hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Chris is also the host of the Green Light podcast, where he shares insightful NFL analysis and engages in entertaining conversations with a wide range of guests. I would recommend that you check it out. But today, I'm thrilled to welcome Chris here onto this podcast, Inside UVA. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
President Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I have to say, I'm a little bit nervous for a couple of reasons. First, I often turn into a fanboy when I'm around elite athletes. And second, you host a really excellent podcast, which is something to which I aspire. Now, I can't ask you for tips about how to be a great football player, given that I am already a great football player. But I would like to ask you your advice about how to host a terrific podcast. What makes a podcast sing?
I think it's about making it as normal as possible. I really do. I think it's about, like, if you and I were sitting down at, I don't know, pick a Charlottesville landmark, and we were getting a cup of coffee or a beer, how would we talk?
Right.
And that's kind of the way I think. It took me some time because in the beginning, I think you have a voice that you try to project that's like more media savvy.
Yeah.
You have analysis and you're trying to get it across in a certain way. But what we do is, as a goal at Greenlight, is we want sports fans to feel like they're sitting on the couch with us.
Right.
And so you're mixing an analysis, but you're also trying to have these really relatable conversations about what it's like to consume sports.
Yeah.
And the thing that hopefully separates us is we happen to be, some people might call us experts because we played, but it also takes a lot of work on the back end for me to keep up with the game. And I think that's something for me that's made this job really rewarding, because I need to work. I'm that type of person. So if you can pair the preparation, which is very regimented and can be very tedious, with a flowing, natural conversation. Right. And that's the hard thing, because if you practice something a lot,
exactly,
you overdo it sometimes.
Yeah.
And it took me some time to settle into, like, hey, we're just shooting the breeze, and that's my goal. And I think better than who the guest is like who the guest is to you. If you're interested in the guest and the guest is interested in you and there's synergy, that's going to come across. Like, I just had Aaron Donald on yesterday, and this is not a plug, but I will say, like, happens to be the best football player of all time, in my opinion, at his position. It also helps that I knew him when he was 21 years old.
Right.
If he was unknown to me and we had never spent time in a locker room and I was just interviewing him, that'd be a great interview. But the thing that I think separates it is the fact that we know each other. So it's that familiarity and casual nature of a conversation.
Yeah. And you have a partner on your podcast, right? And does that help?
I have a few guys, Macon, who went to UVA. I grew up with Macon. He sells real estate here locally. He's a great real estate agent. He's mine.
And he's a very funny guy.
He is. You can't tell him that, but his head won't fit through the door. But it's a yin and yang, and I think you want to have somebody in a room that can make you uncomfortable sometimes, even if they're your good friend. You want somebody to push back. You want somebody smart. And what we came to the conclusion on after the better part of 3 years doing the podcast in varying arrangements, but largely me and him, was like, hey, if we're going to be doing 2 shows a week in the off season that are 2 hours long, and we're going to be doing 3 shows a week in the football season, we need more help, more talent. We need more people. And for me, I didn't get into it to make it like, hey, the Chris Long show. I wanted to be Chris Long and friends, And, I think that allows me to be in a place where I'm really comfortable in myself, and that comes across better. Now we've added Nate Collins, who I used to play with at UVA. My brother works with us, Bo Allen, who I play with in the league, as well as a number of guys that pitch in behind the camera. And I want their personalities to be a part of it too, because that's my favorite thing to listen to, is when you got a big group of guys or like athletes that are talking about their sport. It encourages a casual kind of I like crosstalk. I like
I agree with you.
You know what I mean?
With you. I totally do. So do you have any particularly memorable interviews that you've done over the years, and any particular ones that went really poorly?
Yeah. I'll start with the moments where I was petrified, but I had Matthew McConaughey on, and you're nervous anyways, because that's the coolest dude ever. He just talks cool. He walks cool. Like,
I know. I get really nervous around cool people.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah, I do. And especially like people from different vocations that like it's kind of a projection, but I'm like, I don't really get their life, and they don't get mine, and they're not going to get me. But what you find out when you talk to people is there's commonality, and it's finding those common threads. Well, before I could get to finding the common threads, I was tasked with reading his book, which was called Green Lights. Now our pod is called Green Lights, so I gave him a pass on that. But when he got on, I said, because I'm a big, like, I can't shorten your name, Jim. It's just Jim, right? I'm a big shorten your name guy. It's like a sports thing. Right. And I was like, hey, Matt, thanks so much for joining the whole thing. And great. Happy to be here. 20 seconds later, we're about to flip it on. And he goes, hey, and Chris, one more thing. He goes, it's Matthew. He goes, I don't know if you read the whole chapter about my mom likes me called Matthew, not Matt. And I was like, I'm done. And it was like, okay, ready, go. and I'm like, hey, that's akin to throwing a pick six on the first drive. But teams can come back from that. And I thought it was a great interview. And just to his credit, that's just the kind of guy he is. I mean, he's honest. He takes the air out of the situation by cutting to the chase. And I think it led to a great conversation. And I don't think he was that offended at all. But in my mind, I was like, am I screwed here? Yeah. Now, right. I've had those moments where I've asked the wrong question or I've said the wrong thing. And honestly, like every day I'm on the mic, I kind of dread hearing myself talk. Yeah. If you have that problem, nobody likes their own voice. So every day can be a bit of a struggle, but then you get these really rewarding interviews in sports and out of sports. I've had Paul Nicklin remains one of my favorite interviews we've done. He's a biologist and a photographer for National Geographic. And if you've seen any of these coffee table books with, giant elephant seals or orcas or anything in the ice, the snow, grizzly bears up in Alaska, Kodiak bears, the whole thing. This guy's the guy taking the pictures. He's diving with narwhals and doing all types of dangerous stuff. And just to hear him talk about that, I mean, it was so interesting. He lives such a romantic lifestyle. It's like he's drinking coffee next to a 500-pound bear in the Yukon, and like, he's fishing for giant salmon. He's in the cloud forest in Washington hunting that, like, you ever see that white bear in the Olympic National Park up in Seattle? He's the guy who tracked that thing down. He had to stay in the woods for weeks to find this thing. And so having somebody on like that, that's kind of like, man, it'd be cool to live like that. And for an hour and a half, you are living like that. Yeah, right. Then you can go back to your normal, boring life. Podcaster. So somebody like that, killer. And then I've loved having, like I had Aaron Donald on yesterday. When you have a teammate on that you've shared, the ups and the downs with, somebody like Aaron, who I watched come into the league as a kid, and now he's the greatest of all time at what he did, and watching him walk around with his family on Zoom, getting ready to set up for the interview. Like, we both got emotional during the interview because sports are so deep, they bring people together, and anytime there's a former teammate, I think for me is one of my favorites, because for the listener, you really get a window into the camaraderie,
Right.
and they can see that it's more than just sports for the people
Right.
involved.
Right. Yeah. Well, you went through something incredibly intense together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I don't think you realize that until you get out of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like, I look back at it now and I say, how?
Yeah. Right. Right.
Whether I'm looking back at collegiate athletics, and it's one of the reasons I admire those college athletes so much, is like, you have to be rare. You have to be rare from a mental fortitude standpoint.
Right.
Obviously, you have to be gifted, but you have to work well as a team. You have to go through certain things. You have to stand up to public scrutiny. But more than anything in football, just running into each other for
Right.
the better part of 11 years. For me, when I watch the game now, I'm like, how did you do that?
Yeah. Right.
And we did it with each other. And that was, if you didn't have your teammates, it would have been impossible. And so to be able to share some experiences with these guys post football in the media space or just as guests, it's always a lot of fun.
I bet. So let's talk a little bit about football. You grew up in a football family, obviously. At what age did you start thinking, okay, this is something I want to do?
21.
Weren't you already doing it?
Yeah, I was already doing it. No, so like, as far as like professionally, I did not, when I was a kid, I had like typical aspirations of, I'd love to play pro sports, it's like when I ask my son now, he wants to be Stephen Curry and he wants to be.
Me too, by the way.
Yeah, I'm like, buddy, you better get out in the driveway.
Yeah.
But you have your little kid aspirations, and then coming from a sports family and coming from a family where professional athletics was real, it's less of a fairy tale.
Yeah, right.
I see my dad coming home beat, just beat up physically, 13 surgeries, like coming home late at night, just wiped. Now, I only saw that for the better part of 8 years. He got out when I was 8. And that was one of the reasons I waited to have kids. My wife and I, Meg, waited a long time to have kids because I wanted to be present for that, for that whole thing. And my dad would tell you, it's really hard to be present and be a pro athlete because you are completely enthralled with this thing.
Yeah. It's all consuming, right?
It consumes you. Yeah. And so I think that's the hard part. It's finding the balance and being a whole person while you're an athlete. And so, yeah, that's what this conversation about. That's what doing the podcast is about, is like figuring out who you are outside football. And so I don't even remember what the initial question was, Jim.
It was when you began thinking about playing football. I'm curious too. You grew up here in Charlottesville, went to high school here. Was there any question about whether you would attend UVA, or was that a really easy choice?
So, like, to go back, when I was a junior or a sophomore in high school, I was playing 4 sports. I took 1 year of baseball, then 1 year of lacrosse, but I was basketball, football. I was not thinking like, hey, I'm going to go play college football. Just as I wasn't thinking like, I'm going to go play pro football. Like, again, seeing what I was like, I'd rather not do that. And my parents certainly were like, I'd rather not have my kid do that. I can remember that they told me the first time that they sent me out for football. I wanted to go out for football when I was like 11 or 12. And I still think that's kind of early, and they did too. And they were nervous about it, and they didn't want me to play because of my dad's background. And they had a conversation after I went to bed that was relayed to me. And it went something like, what do? We don't want him to play. Do we tell him not to play? We don't want it to be like some forbidden fruit.
Right.
Let's send him out there. He's not very tough. He's going to get his nose bloodied, and he's not going to come back. And that might have been true at 12. But one thing that I was hardworking, committed, and I just didn't quit. And, I think like that was my dad's message to me, is like, whatever you do, you're going to do it 1,000%, which is not a real number. But, whether it's you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be the most committed, most hardworking doctor in America. If you're going to be a football player, you're going to do it. If you're going to be a drama major, you better be out there acting your ass off, it's bring your passion, bring your hard hat. And that just really was what I loved about sports in high school. And it was baseball for me until about junior year. And junior year, I started getting these letters in the mail from Cal, from Brown. I was taking on a couple unofficial visits to UVA, so I get to go see. And I said, you know what, I might be okay at this. And I think part of having a dad who's in the Hall of Fame is you don't think you're a big deal,
Right.
because at the dinner table, that's a big deal. So I never bought my own BS, and I never was like, I'm going to be great. I kind of had to be talked into it. Like, no, you're good.
Yeah.
And so I took the opportunity the minute it was given to me. Al Groh was the head football coach. He had my coach John Blake and I over to his office, and they had one of those Super Bowl trophies up there, which now I got some replicas of my own. But
Right.
I remember the first time I ever looked at it, it was like this shiny object. And to me, it was an identifier of his experience.
Right.
And I said, you know what, like in this recruiting process, I could be wooed and wowed by a lot of extracurricular stuff, like what the facility's like, yada, 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 how many games we've won. But I wanted to learn what Al knew, because I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, whether I'm going pro or not, I want to learn from somebody who's been there. And he offered me, and 3 days later, I think I took the offer. It was my first offer. I took a couple unofficial visits. I did not like the architecture in Blacksburg. I thought it was hideous. It looked like I was going to like a military boot camp. And so I stayed out of Blacksburg. No offense to my friends in Blacksburg.
I'm not commenting at all.
Pokey Stone's not my thing. And then I went down to UNC, and I really liked UNC. I liked Florida State, didn't think I was good enough. So Virginia was the sweet spot for me. And I was really glad I made the decision. When did I know I was a pro? Probably the spring game of my sophomore year. I thought, we went to the Biltmore for, the Friday night. We had the spring game. Sorry, Coach Groh, the next day. And we're out there, and I probably had about 6 sacks. And at this point, I was a young guy. I was like following the upperclassmen around. And after the game, people were like, wow. And it took me a minute. I went back and watched the film, and I was like, this guy's pretty good.
Interesting.
And I just kept working, man. And junior year, they asked me, I had a first round grade. I could have come out, and I could have probably gotten drafted in the bottom of the first round. And some people were kind of counseling me to do that. But I wanted to come back and finish what I started. My teammates were really important to me. We had some really strong bonds, and came back, and I'm really glad we did. We won a lot of games, and I wouldn't trade that for the world, and my draft stock improved. So it just kind of all came together.
So you have been the part of successful teams, including 2 Super Bowl championship teams, one with New England, and then the very next year with Philadelphia, who beat New England. And I'm wondering, am I the only one who's noticed that you were obviously the difference maker given the results?
Well, I want to give credit to LeGarrette Blount as well. He was, and this is all tongue in cheek, because there were some damn good players on that team. But, I do think generally when they made that decision, to go with some veterans like in Philly, whether it was me, LeGarrette Blount, Patrick Robinson, a whole host of guys, Torrey Smith, who happens to be a Terp. We put that to the side. But like, I am proud of what that veteran crop of guys brought to that team.
Yeah.
And
it's impressive.
I think for me and LeGarrette, it was one, scary as hell to line up against your old team because of I left, on my own volition. Like I was like, most people think when you leave New England, something's wrong with you, but I wanted to leave because of a scheme fit. And it was that simple for me. It wasn't really any big secret. But when you get into that game, it's like the last thing you want to do is lose to your old team and sit there and think what might have been. But LeGarrette and I got to go on this wonderful ride where we leave New England and we do the impossible. We came out of nowhere to be in that game, let alone win it. And I really do think having some of the veteran leadership that Joe Douglas and Howie Roseman brought in, and not to take anything away from the young guys and the best guys on the team, like the Fletcher Coxes of the world, but I think it really helped to have some guys from other teams with other experiences and guys with some championship experience, which can be overrated, come in and sprinkle a little bit of that into the pot.
So what do you think makes for a successful team? I mean, what do you need to bring every day, every week? How does it finally come together?
I think number one, the organizational vision has to be intentional. and clear. There can't be, we make it up as we go along. There are certain things that we're adaptive on, day-to-day schedule making, curveballs, things like that. But if I ask a GM, what's the vision of this organization, or an owner, and they have to be in lockstep, what's the vision of this organization? There has to be an elevator pitch.
Right.
You've got to be able to concretely convey like where you want to go. And then you have to be bold enough to follow that vision, because a lot of people have visions, but they don't enforce that vision or that standard. Right. And you see it all the time in the business world, and probably in the classroom, and,
right.
and administratively, like you have to have a vision and you have to have the stones to stick to it. Because a lot of people, they want to take the easy way out, which would be, hey, somebody's not living up to this standard. It's one of our best players. Do we take the day off in communicating that? Clear communication is huge. Everyone has to be okay with being criticized and know that it comes from a place of love and trust. So like if you're on the same page and you love your coach, or you trust your coach or your teammate, then I can say the harshest thing in the world, just like this.
Yeah, right.
In this voice. And that's how we communicated.
Yeah.
And I think great teams have that ability to not only follow that vision, but when somebody's not living up to that vision, all it takes is this, just a conversation. Too many people are afraid of what they think is confrontation. It's not confrontation.
It's just being honest.
Each other. We're an organism.
Right.
We're not individuals. Put yourself, you're always going to be an individual. You're always going to want to do well. That's healthy. It's healthy to have an ego, but you have to ultimately submit to being a part of the team. And the best teams I was on, there was a healthy level of that, and clear hierarchy. Who are the, so to speak, alphas on the team?
Right.
Who are the guys that are supposed to do this? Who are the guys that are supposed to do that? And are you doing your job? And do you love your particular job? And the way to sell that job as being something you can love as an organization is results. So that's why the best organizations, it's like a snowball effect, like the Patriots with Tom Brady for a long time.
Right.
We have the results. So you can come here, it's going to be somebody else coming here getting a ring. Whereas if you're an organization that's in shambles, it's harder to enforce that standard, because people are like, what's in it for me? We're not even going to win. Why would I sacrifice if you guys aren't doing the right thing? So there's a few things. It's kind of the perfect storm, but I think more than anything, you got to know who you are. You have to have proof in the pudding, and you have to communicate clearly and have hierarchy.
So I want to ask you about playing in the Super Bowl and how crazy it is. It's become this huge extravaganza. It's part football game, part concert, part parade. And what was that experience like? And in particular, I've always wondered, the halftime is like 3 hours long. And how do you deal with that?
It's crazy. I mean, you think it's crazy as a consumer. It's crazy as a...
I bet.
I mean, like, I can remember playing in my first Super Bowl in Houston for the Patriots. I can remember getting to our team hotel. And usually you get to your team hotel, especially if you're a man in your 30s, with multiple kids or what have you, like you've been working your butt off all week. You can't wait to plop on the bed when the team bus gets to the Hyatt and just lay there for an hour. Like I would sit in the hotel and listen, be too lazy to change the channel. You know that Mario Lopez extra thing that comes on if you get in a certain hotel room and it just gets stuck on the TV. I'd sit there on the bed and forget it was on. I was so exhausted. But that was my quiet time when I got to whatever city it was.
Right.
We're very routine oriented. And that's the biggest challenge of the Super Bowl is when you get in that hotel, there's no respite. You get up to your room, you might have 2 hours before your first team meeting, and you might just want to lay there. But I can remember vividly in Houston feeling like I was in a fishbowl. You could hear everyone out on the street. You could hear helicopters. You could hear autograph seekers down the lobby. The city is like buzzing wherever you go. And I can remember even the game of the day of the game, trying to go get tickets to deliver to my family. Everybody's got tickets that they can deliver to their family members, and they distribute those like the morning of the game. You had to wade through a crowd of people to get to another hotel. It just totally throws your routine off. There's a party Friday night that the owner has of all people that you're supposed to go to. And I'm like, I want to watch film. I want to go to bed. You know, one of the Super Bowls, we were at the Mall of America in Minnesota. It was 0 degrees outside. What do? You've been inside all week. The only place I've been is Benihana's. half the team is sick. Everybody's hooked up to IV bags. It's just like, get me to the biggest day of my life.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like waiting for a wedding,
Right.
praying it doesn't rain, and there's nothing you can do about it all week. You're watching the forecast. That's what just trying to get through that week is. Don't let me roll my ankle in practice.
Right.
Don't let this distraction pop up. Don't, I need my sleep. My phone keeps ringing. People are asking me for things. It's just the longest week as an athlete who's very routine oriented. That's what football players are.
Yeah. And do you have to practice to get used?
Halftime's an hour long. Halftime's an hour long.
And do you have to practice? I mean, do you do anything to prepare for that?
For the halftime, absolutely.
Yeah.
We would generally, when you get into halftime, you have a minute or two where it's like, hey, go get some water. If you need an IV, get an IV, generally get an IV. There's a scramble, like kind of people are in their lockers. And then eventually the coaches come in with a whiteboard and you have both sides of the locker room divide and you talk about some schematic things.
Right.
The Super Bowl halftime, I could hear Lady Gaga like up, like boom, boom, the bass and stuff. So one, you're trying to stay focused, and two, it's very long. And so you'll have to go through these like weeks in advance. You will try to simulate. They'll do mock halftimes, and you'll have a calisthenic warm-up that's extended, a stretching routine, things like that, to keep you mentally and physically in it. So when you go back out, you're not sleepwalking, because football, more than any sport, takes a lot of like, I got to psych myself up to go run into this person. It's crazy. And if you take an hour off and you come out flat, that first drive can be the difference in the game. So it's a huge, huge deal.
Right. Let me switch to college sports for a second. I'm curious what you think about the state of college athletics, and in particular, the name, image, and likeness business.
I am I'm an American. I live in America. We value a free market, people that provide some service for society, whether it's entertainment or what have you. Like they generally get, compensated for their slice of the pie. And so I have never been against athletes getting theirs. I used to think about athletics and in the context of academia and think, well, there's probably a lot of people that think it's kind of a sideshow. It's not really school. It's, you're getting certain guys in on scholarship. Now you've got people transferring in.
Right.
The portal is kind of messy. What do we make of it? Like the core of a university is about the university experience. It's about the classroom and that sort of thing. And I think sports really enrich the college experience. So whatever the landscape is, because these people do generate a lot of revenue for universities,
right?
Wherever that landscape takes us in the context of a free market, I'm okay with, even if it's messy in the beginning, even if it feels like the Wild West, because this is the natural progression. If an 18-year-old kid who's on scholarship, which is no doubt about it, some form of compensation,
right? Exactly.
Going out there and playing football in front of 60,000 people and raking in TV deal money for, networks and universities and bowl games and things like that. I understand the scholarships part of that, but I also think that we should let the market decide what these kids are worth. And that's the way it is in the real world. And so I'm totally okay with the direction it's going, even if it's messy. And as a fan, like I'm not saying it's perfect. There's times where I'm like, what are we doing? Like, I'm scratching my head. The portal's crazy. It's hard to keep track of things. Yeah. And for coaches, it's really hard. But I would also say this, for a long time, coaches could go where they wanted to go. They were making the most of their kings on a lot of these college campuses where they're like emperors. So I'm not very empathetic to their plight and having to recruit and re-recruit. It's the rest of the world now has it good too. And so I look at the NCAA tournament, Jim. NC State would be a perfect example. That team is all transfers, right?
Right.
And I don't think anybody really noticed. I think there was a certain what's going to happen to the pageantry? What's going to happen to the feeling that college sports gives us if these guys are like mercenaries, if they're hired help?
Right.
What you found, I think, in a lot of these scenarios is those NC State kids have been in Raleigh for the better part of a year, but they're in love with the place.
I know, right?
You
can tell. You can tell.
They're talking about 1983. They're spending time at that big bell tower they've got. They're mixing it up with the students. They're wearing red. As a fan, I didn't notice they were all transfers.
Right.
And it felt like a very NC State run. It has felt like a very positive and heartfelt thing that the whole community is going through. And I don't think it matters that these guys are, they were at Arizona State last year or whatever. This stuff is going to work itself out. Now, eventually, I think you could see a super conference. Eventually, you could see a collective bargaining agreement, because eventually that's where it goes. And then universities have to decide how that fits into the ethos of being a school, right?
Right, exactly right.
And I think that's hard. I don't know what you think about it, but my principle comes first. And the principle for me is, if you create something, you should
be able
share in it.
Yeah, you should share in the value.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's also just hard at this point to figure out what this is going to look like when the dust settles. It's just an incredibly volatile time in college athletics.
It's scary for some schools.
Yeah.
I mean, no question, like there's going to be at some point a big change, and there's going to be some Mendoza line for schools that are going to be able to join the party or not. And unfortunately, like if it's a money issue, you can go to some of these schools' alumni bases and be like, hey, we need more money. But, like, is that fair to have the alumni pumping out millions of dollars at some small basketball school just to be able to stay afloat? Like, I'm no expert. I do think it's going to be messy at some point, but I think, like anything, it's like in the NFL, we freak out about rule changes every year. They're talking about a hip drop tackle. They're going to change the kickoff return. There are rules and ways we do things in sports and in college athletics too, that at every turn of the road make us nervous, because it's change. But I believe that we love college sports and we love athletics in general enough to figure it out.
So it's so interesting you say that. That's what I keep telling myself, is that there are enough people out there who care a lot about college sports, and not just football and basketball, but the whole range of sports. And there are a lot of people who would like to see leagues that are competitive. And if you put those two things together, it's a big incentive to figure it out. I think you're right that it's going to get more messy over the next few years, but I'm optimistic that this will be figured out.
I am too. And UVA is a really attractive place. So I think people are always going to want to transfer here, and always going to want to be on grounds and wear the uniform. We've got great coaches. We have great Olympic sports, beautiful facilities, and a wonderful place, right?
Yeah.
I think we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And there's enough smart people around here to figure it out, right? And just to echo our sentiments from a moment ago, like, as far as UVA is concerned, I think we're going to figure it out.
I do too. So do you have time to talk a little bit about your foundation?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I know that part of it is focused on bringing clean and accessible water to East Africa. And I'm wondering, when and why did that become your focus?
Kind of, nothing's on accident, but in my life sometimes. No, it was maybe my 6th or 7th year in the league. And I was in the prime of my career, having a great time, but I kind of felt like I was head down, not really doing much else. And I don't mean philanthropically. We'd always kind of been philanthropic quietly.
Yeah.
And like my parents, philanthropic people, my dad, in the context of him growing up with not a lot, being a Boys and Girls Club kid,
right,
seeing what the club did for him. Like, my foray into philanthropy was watching my mom and dad work. And, my mom has been huge in the club scene, the Boys and Girls Club scene.
Yeah, I know.
There's no club scene in Charlotte. She's been
not
huge.
that I've discovered. Anyway.
No, I haven't found one. Although I love Dirty Nellies. Maybe there. So, but yeah, no, like, my mom was integral at the Boys and Girls Club here locally, and I just kind of watched her work. And you don't do it to be like them, but it's just, you're like, that's what people do when they're lucky and they're given a lot.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do something with what I've been given, but also, more than anything, I wanted to travel. And I hadn't been out of the country a lot. I'd only been to London to play football, and I barely remember that one because the Patriots beat us 44-7, I've been told. Blacked that one out. So I just signed a big deal. I was playing with St. Louis, The coach that had signed me to the deal was Jeff Fisher. And most people listening to this probably know Jeff Fisher's the guy with the mustache who used to coach the Titans.
Right.
He's a fantastic guy. But he had me in his office the first day. And as he's kind of showing me something in his office, I catch a picture on his desk of him climbing up this snowy mountain with a couple of people, and they don't have crampons, but they've got their trekking poles and stuff. And I'm like, Coach, you're like a mountaineer. Where'd you go? Like, he's like, oh, that's Kilimanjaro. I went over there with Wounded Warriors, and we brought some amputees up to the top. Teddy Bruschi, myself did it. Bruschi, linebacker for the Patriots back in the day. And we had a blast. And I said, man, I love being outside and I love trekking and climbing. I said, I'd love to do that. And he said, hey, man, one day when you retire, that would be a lot of fun. And I was like, I'd like to do it this offseason, Coach. The contract's already signed, right? There's nothing you can put into my contract about climbing mountains. So he was like, you're crazy, but I can't stop you. And I brought one of my teammates, James Hall, who was kind of like a big brother to me over there. We climbed Kilimanjaro, had a blast, really kicked our butts going up that mountain.
Yeah. And
when we got down, we were in the hotel bar having a beer, and it only takes one when you get off that mountain and at that altitude. And I hear somebody walk into the bar and say my name, or not my name. They're saying Chris. And I'm like, I'm in Tanzania. There's probably another Chris. No question. And I kind of recognize the voice. I look behind me. It's Joe Buck. And Joe Buck from baseball and football and everything.
Yeah.
The announcer. Joe Buck is not only a St. Louis guy, but he worked with my dad, so I knew him a little bit growing up. He was one of the first people that showed me the ropes in St. Louis, where you want to live, this whole thing when I was 22, 23 years old. And I said, what are you doing here? And after the dust settled, I figured out he was there on a water project. And he was there with the Goodwill Ambassador to Tanzania. And they were like, come on out with us tomorrow. We're going to go see a project. And I looked at my flight. I wasn't going to be able to make it. At the time, I wasn't hooked the way I was a month later.
Right.
At the time, I was like, this sounds amazing. I have been very appreciative of my time here. When I go someplace, I like to be very thankful for being hosted,
yeah, right.
On the mountain with the porters, at home at the hotel, walking around in the market. I got to see so much of Tanzanian life, but I also noticed a lot of hardships. Naturally, if you travel, you're going to notice things that are different standards of living.
Absolutely.
And this was my first time really. And so I was blown away by that, and having that conversation about water on the way out the door kind of planted a seed. I was trying to start a foundation because I guess what hit me was like, hey, year 7 here. If I tear my ACL next year and I'm out of the league, like I've done some good things with my platform, but I've also left a lot of engagement on the table, not, starting a foundation. And so I'm very pragmatic, research water. The ALS Ice Bucket Challenge was going on, if you remember that. And I remember thinking, we are so lucky. Like, not only is this the best thing in the world for this cause, because they've seen returns that are like 20-fold in fundraising from this mechanism on social media, which tells me there is an opportunity to engage people on social media, especially as an athlete. But also, we got a lot of water that we're just able to, and we're lucky. We're just putting it on people. And I watched what it was like in Tanzania for the better part of 2 weeks, and I was blown away. So I came home and just started brainstorming, and I thought, hey, pragmatically, if you want to make a difference in the world, and I want to give back to a place that gave me a really wonderful experience, let me start brainstorming a way that we can provide clean water in some of the regions that I just spent time. And I don't want to do a one-off. I don't want to do one well. I don't want to do a hand pump. I want to make a dent. And the more I talked to Doug, who was the Goodwill Ambassador to Tanzania, and other players, I realized that there could be an appetite for it in sport. And so we started the Water Boys. And initially I had a vision for, every team would fund a well each year. I was like, hey, we do turkey drives, we do toy drives. We're talking about water. Like, people can't survive without it. But that's when I realized it's very outside the box. It's a very outside the box concept for American people, especially. We're talking about, I believe this is before Flint. This is before any of the major infrastructure issues that we've had with clean water that kind of woke people up to what's going on globally. It was a hard sell at first, but we started putting in these large solar powered wells, which can provide water to up to 5,000 to 7,000 people. A lot of times less, but we've had villages of 6,000, 7,000 people that benefit from the implementation of a solution. And so large solar powered wells, not hand pumps. There are a ton of inoperable pumps and wells around the world. And I'm not saying the people didn't have altruistic reasons for doing those wells. A lot of good people invested in infrastructure and walked away and didn't know 3 months later that the pump's not working anymore.
Yeah.
So for us, it was like providing a solution, but also one that's sustainable. And it was solar for us. And these are really big projects that can help a lot of people. And we started off with a goal of 32 wells for 32 teams. We shattered that. One of the years we won the Super Bowl, I can remember it was the week of the Super Bowl. We met our goal, and then we moved to a people serve goal. We wanted to provide 1 million people with the gift of clean water, and we're halfway there.
Wow.
And so we've expanded into Kenya a little bit. We work domestically as well. A lot of people say, "Hey, what about here?" Which is it's a fair question, right? Because I don't know what your motivation for asking that question is generally, but there is a conversation to be had about, over 1 million people in the United States don't have clean water.
Right.
And so if that's going to hook people into the cause at large, great. We're going to work domestically too. Right. It's a huge problem in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a huge problem all over the world. When we implement solutions, it not only stops mortality in the age range of 1 to 5 from skyrocketing because of waterborne illness. Diarrhea can kill a young kid in East Africa.
Right.
It also improves agriculture. It improves infrastructure. It improves the lives of women and girls, because women and girls are the ones that bear the brunt of gathering water,
right,
of being away from school, being out of the community. And I think, like, with all the strong women in Tanzania and around the world, if you think about all the women that could be drivers, that could be leaders in their communities, because we need everybody. Some of the strongest leaders in the world are women leaders, and we don't in Tanzania, those women are walking 7 miles in a day. They're not spending any time in community, talking some sense into us men, like leading the charge in their corner of the community, like helping raise their family, going to work. The women and girls, or the girls, are not in school. Kids are missing school. Right. So everything improves when you implement a clean water solution. And we found that for sure. So that's Water Boys. I mean, and we just keep trucking with that, but we also have the educational equity stuff. And I think that ties in really nicely, because sometimes you'll actually do a project at a school.
Oh, interesting.
We'll do like filtration systems here in the United States, or we'll do a big well. I'll never forget, we went to do a project in Tanzania, and we'll bring over veterans and athletes to climb Kilimanjaro every year. And it's not our biggest fundraiser, but for me, it's really important, because it's why I went over there.
Right.
And so I'm giving people the same introduction into the culture and the experience. And on the way down and before, we go look at projects, and we'll look at projects we've done and projects that are to be done. And the projects that are to be done, it is tangible, the lack of hope, the disarray that some of these communities are in, although the people are incredibly stoic and brave and positive, like just so thankful. Like they don't complain over things we complain over, but they need help. And they don't need like a charitable help in the way I'm looking at it. They just need empowerment.
Yeah, right.
I want to help and get out of the way. And hey, part of it is like the empowerment of this resource. We are training people in the village to be able to distribute the water equitably, to have an important role in the community. Like we have Tanzanian nationals working with our implementation partners, so that when we're here, it's not lip service. Something breaks down, you can go fix it.
Right.
And I think having people in country that feel like it's not just a handout. It's like, hey, this is a gift. You do with it what you want, and you empower your community, and you empower yourself through this gift, and you take it the rest of the way. We're doing the easy thing. You guys are going to do the hard work, but you cannot wake up every day and wonder where your next glass of water is coming from.
No, I mean, so much flows from that, right? So to speak.
Terrible.
But it's so fundamental.
It's so fundamental. And so just having that, like the hope in a community that we've actually affected. We'll take the vets over to a community that the before and after, the after, you can see it.
Right.
You can just feel it. And we've gone to a school where 400 primary school kids attending this school. There's a ravine 200 yards outside the school. You go down in the creek, and this is outside of Arusha in Tanzania, and there is a creek that runs through the school, and it's got gasoline film on it and trash running through the creek. The kids are scooping their water that they drink every day thoughtlessly out of this creek. Insane. And, right. I'll never forget one of my Marine buddies, Elliot Ruiz, who's been all over the world. And one of the reasons we have men and women that have served doing this stuff is because they've seen things like this. They have a service-oriented mindset.
Right.
It's what they do.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll never forget, he broke down crying watching this thing. And he's seen the world. And it just never ceases to amaze me, the strength that some of these folks have that are going through it. And I'd like to not have to pat them on the back for being so damn tough and strong.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I want you to be able to wake up like I wake up in the morning and say, hey, I turned my tap on, or, if my kid's thirsty, I don't have to second guess it or scoop water out of a watering hole that animals are defecating in.
Right.
If there's a pandemic and you're worried about washing your hands on Navajo Nation and you don't even have running water, like, how do you expect people to survive, to thrive?
Yeah. Do you think your time at UVA helped prepare you for life after football?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think, and I don't mean this, you're not exalted as a football player at Virginia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're expected to be a member of the community.
Right.
It's not the rest of the community in football. We're not the only show in town. Basketball has got a big, beautiful arena. All the Olympic sports are awesome. It's a truly academic, undertaking. It's not, you don't come here to play football and then I go to a little school. School's really hard here. And the people, they push you to be better, whether you realize it or not, some of the stresses that are introduced to your life because of the time management, because of the expectation, and because of the lack of being exalted, I think, and thinking, hey, I'm the man.
Right.
It prepares you for life after football because that's what life's like.
Right.
Right. I'm not, hey, I'm just dad now. I'm just the guy who runs a business. I'm just, and I think being a Virginia football player can be humbling in a really good way.
Interesting.
It's like we can play in the Orange Bowl. We can play in the ACC championship. We can upset FSU and people rushing the field like we did in 06 or whatever it is. Right. I can get drafted, but I'll always be a football player and the rest of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to hide and just be a football player.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, something that served me well, whether I realized it intentionally or not when I made the decision.
Yeah. So last question. You are now back in Charlottesville. You've made it your home. I'm curious what brought you back and what keeps you here.
The club scene.
No, I thought you were going to say the incredibly charismatic president of UVA.
Yeah, the president. Yeah. The president. I feel like we're in good hands. You know what? Listen, I need space. I like being able to walk outside and have a yard and hey, listen, working up in Philly would have been great. Staying in Philly, I lived in St. Louis for a long time, loved it, but this is a really special place as far as just walk outside, man. This time of year, you can't beat it. I'll wait all winter for something like this.
I know what you mean.
And just the magic in the air here, this being outside, being able to go to Humpback Rocks or Spy Rock or Crabtree Falls or hit the James River. Or, I'm a real I like to be outside. I like to be, and I like to be around my friends. And it's sometimes as simple as that.
Yeah.
I said this on the pod the other day, and some people might take this the wrong way, but I don't mean it that way. Everybody thinks Charlottesville is the best city in the world that lives in Charlottesville. When I was in St. Louis, everybody thought St. Louis was the best city in the world. In Philly, they all think Philly's the best city in the world.
Yeah, but we're right.
you know what makes this place great for me growing up here is the people. And I can't divorce myself from that reality of growing up here and having 5 to 7 high school friends
Right.
that I'm still close friends with, that, we'll go camping on the weekends. We'll be watching the Final Four. We'll go to Dirty Nelly's. We'll go to a Virginia game. We'll be at a baseball game. We'll be at a football game. Our kids there's so many awesome things to take your kids to do because of the university.
I agree.
And I think the size of the place is perfect. I mean, shoot, if it got any bigger, I'd be in traffic all day.
Right.
But I think what makes it attractive to me as a place to call home is it's always been home. I can't speak to somebody who's moved here at 31 years old. I've heard from people, man, when they move here, it's such an awesome place. So when I have people come in and visit, but for me, it's about the people. I think that's what it comes down to, is community. And I think we've got a strong community here, and I love being a part of it. I just do. And I'm a creature of habit. I like being near my friends and do the same thing. Kind of boring. You could call me boring, but that's why home's home.
Yeah. Well, I know the feeling. It's what brought my wife, Katie, and me back, honestly. Chris, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. Likewise. And I really admire what you're doing with your foundation.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's important, and it's very tangible, and you can't do much else if you don't have clean water.
And everybody's got a cause, and they're all different. Everybody's just got to do something, right?
Yeah.
Hope everybody else is doing their part and do the best you can.
This episode of Inside UVA was recorded the week of April 1st, 2024.
Inside UVA is a production of WTJU 91.1 FM and the Office of the President at the University of Virginia. Inside UVA is produced by Jaden Evans, Ariane Ballou, Mary Gardner-McGee, and Matt Weber. Special thanks to Maria Jones and McGregor McCants. Our music is Turning to You from Blue Dot Sessions. You can listen